Welcome to the CHCI Leadership Conference breakout session, Leading the Way, Puerto Rico's Path Forward. This session is possible due to the gracious contributions from our sponsor, the Transportation Institute. Our panel chair is Representative Darren Soto, who represents Florida's 9th Congressional District. He is the chair of the Future Forum Caucus, whip of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and a proud member of the New Democrat Coalition, Problem Solvers Caucus, Congressional Progressive Caucus, and LGBT Equality Caucus. Our moderator for this discussion is Linda Lopez, an Emmy Award-winning journalist and anchor at WCBS News Radio. She is the author of The Fearless Rise and Powerful Resonance of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Please welcome Representative Darren Soto for opening remarks.
Hello, I'm Congressman Darren Soto, and I'm honored to be able to address all of our friends at CHCI, and thank you to CHCI for all you're doing to create new opportunities for young Latinos and Latinas to be able to serve in internships and other opportunities on the Hill and throughout Washington, D.C. You're truly creating the next generation of Hispanic leaders. Today, we're here to discuss leading the way, Puerto Rico's path forward in this session. And I applaud you for picking this critical topic on the challenges facing my family's native island, La Isla del Encanto. We know Puerto Rico is struggling through an over 10-year recession. Hurricane Maria was the deadliest disaster in modern history, with nearly 2,000 Americans there dying. They're stuck under a Promesa fiscal board that is causing draconian cuts there. They faced a round of earthquakes over these last 2 years, and now they've been hit with COVID-19 like the rest of the world. And we see this in the numbers. 11.8% of the population left the island over the last 10 years. That was the largest drop of any population in U.S. history. We in Central Florida know. Corresponding to that, in the district I represent, Florida's 9th Congressional District in Central Florida, we had the fastest growing district in the nation. We grew 40%. We see all the brothers and sisters from the island who are arriving here in Central Florida, and we welcome them. We also understand we have a responsibility to help stabilize the economy and the quality of life back on the island. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about a path forward. I couldn't be prouder of President Biden for releasing immediately over $8 billion in disaster relief that had been stuck in bureaucracy, intentionally created by President Trump to stop the island from getting the billions of dollars in disaster relief we passed after Hurricane Maria. We also see territories, including Puerto Rico, be treated equally for the first time in the American Rescue Plan. The first time territories are treated equally in a major relief package. This couldn't come at a better time as we're facing COVID-19 and the island needs both vaccines and funding to be able to respond to this pandemic and the economic crisis that also has ensued. We're also treating Puerto Rico equally under Medicaid. My Medicaid Equality Bill just passed the Energy and Commerce Committee unanimously in a bipartisan fashion, and it makes sure that Puerto Rico gets Medicaid equality in their funding for the next 5 years as they ramp up to full services. We know it's the right thing to do. Their healthcare system has been through so much due to unstable funding. It's been mired in debt, and it has been attacked by Hurricane Maria, thereby undermining their healthcare system. We can do better, we can build back better, and we will. We're also investing in jobs in manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism down there. Finally, we know the territorial status isn't working. It's failed an island of 3.2 million people, more than nearly half the states. And so it's time for us to resolve the political status in Puerto Rico. I support statehood personally, as did a majority of Puerto Rican voters this last November in their general election, where 52.52% of Puerto Ricans in a high turnout general election voted in favor of statehood. It's now time for Puerto Ricans to have a final say and a binding election. For statehood, yes or no, or potentially some compromise. But the answer is clear. We need to give Puerto Ricans a decision in the future of their destiny. We will continue to work with CHC and CHCI to empower our brothers and sisters on the island, and we together will find a path forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Lopez. I am a news anchor at WCBS News Radio here in New York City, and I am so excited to be here today to have this conversation with my fellow Puerto Ricans. We want to say thank you first to Congressman Darren Soto for giving our opening remarks and for giving us a great place to start our conversation. And thank you, too, to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, CHCI, for having this timely leadership conference and for focusing attention on issues that are so important to our community. Specifically, I want to say thank you for allowing us to have this discussion about Puerto Rico. You know, our beautiful little island has suffered so much devastation in just the past few years that talking today with business leaders and elected leaders about how the public and private sector can work together on Puerto Rico's path forward, you know, whether that means the economy, growth, trade, educational opportunities, workforce opportunities. It's such a timely and needed conversation. So I'm very happy that I am joined with three experts for this panel to discuss all of these issues, and I'd like to introduce them to you now. First, we are going to introduce Rafael Tatito Hernandez. He is Speaker of the Puerto Rico House of Representatives. He sits on the Finance and Budget Committees. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be part of Solutions.
And our next speaker is Eduardo Pagan. Eduardo is Vice President and General Manager of Caribbean Services for Tote Maritime, and he brings more than 30 years of business and managerial experience in the transportation industry, which we know is so important to Puerto Rico. Eduardo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Linda. It's really a pleasure to be along with Speaker Hernandez and Director Feliciano.
Thank you so much. And finally, we are joined by Carmen Feliciano. She is the Executive Director of the Puerto Rico Federal Affairs Administration, which focuses on promoting Puerto Rico's economic and public policy initiatives to achieve a better quality of life for people in Puerto Rico. Carmen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure. Thank you, CHCI, for making Puerto Rico a top priority and helping us move forward during these times. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to jump right in with my questions for all of you right now, because those of us who are not on the island are eager to know how things are right now after Puerto Rico suffering all these traumas in the past few years. Hurricane Maria, or actually Hurricanes Irma and Maria, followed by several earthquakes, followed by the pandemic coming to the island. What is the state today? What is the state of mind in people in Puerto Rico? And what do they feel they need that maybe isn't being heard right now?
Well, I'll take that. I'll start out saying that I'm very proud of the people of Puerto Rico, because these times of crisis that you all know, these past few years, we've been hit by two hurricanes, Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Irma, the earthquakes in the southern part of the island, and now the COVID pandemic. There is a resiliency on the people of Puerto Rico that proves our strength, our desire to move forward. We're thankful to the Biden-Harris administration and everything they've been doing to help Puerto Rico stand up and have the resources necessary to move forward. The governor of Puerto Rico, Governor Pedro Pierluisi, has a very strong agenda to improve Puerto Rico, improve our infrastructure, and have everyone working together to move Puerto Rico forward and achieve a better quality of life to the people of Puerto Rico. So we have identified programs of importance and regional impact on every aspect, on all industries, so that we can strengthen the island. And one of those areas is the infrastructure. Strengthening and bettering Puerto Rico infrastructure across the board so that we can establish the base to move the island forward. And one of those projects that I'm sure all of you have been aware and heard about is the transformation of the energy production in Puerto Rico, and the transmission and distribution have been transferred to a private company, Luma. Generation, we're in the process of accepting RFPs for maintenance and improvement of the generation plants in Puerto Rico. And that's a pivotal moment for the island. We're all going through the ups and downs of this big transformation so that we can have the base for private and public sector to move forward in a resilient economy. And that's just one of the, but I'll give time to my other friends in the panel.
No worries. Mr. Hernandez, tell us about how the people of Puerto Rico are feeling and dealing with all these multiple traumas that have happened.
We are living the same right now that a lot of people in the States are suffering, especially in the job creations. And there is a lot of people who have the opportunity to have these federal beneficials for salaries through the COVID. And there is a lot of people that are not working. So there is a transition that's going to start doing it in the private sector that's going to be good for us. There's a lot of investment. We have the resources right now for building and rebuilding our economy. That we are really in the crisis bring great opportunities. We just have to be part of the solution and participate as our economy, our laborers, our enterprise and members of different organizations be part of the rebuilding of the island. And the crisis is not just pandemic, the hurricanes and the earthquakes. Everything is wrapped around the fiscal crisis. So right now we're in the right moment for economical stability related to the parity, for example, for Medicaid that we need in Puerto Rico, and we need some adjustment to the manufacturer incentives in a way that we guarantee that move of job creation. That's a huge part of our economy. 50% of our economy is industrialized. And I know that one of the main clients of Eduardo Pagan are the industrialists, so we need a sector that is strong, that is there competing with other jurisdictions around the world, and that is our priority, to activate our economy and be part of the economic growth in the island.
So Eduardo, that brings us to you. We know actually that it's the reality for many people in Puerto Rico that they're without reliable access to many resources, whether we're talking about electricity or food or medicine. So how can companies like Tote Maritime, which do their business in Puerto Rico, conduct their business, but also invest in some of the improvements that the island and the people of the island need?
You know, Linda, it is a fact that without the key infrastructure in the right place, the island opportunities for economic development can actually be fairly limited. In the case of the transportation sector, which is highly based on the private sector, there's been significant investments being done in the last decade to make sure that we can actually deliver a very steady performance on the needs of the people of the island. We cannot, deny the background of the fact that for more than a decade we have been going through a significant depression, and all of a sudden we get the hurricanes, we get the earthquake, then the pandemic, and the influx of federal funding has been the biggest ever I've seen in my lifetime. And there's a lot of hope about how well we can actually handle those funds and take Puerto Rico to the next level as far as economic development, taking something in consideration that is very critical. We still have 58% of our childs in the island living in a poverty level. We got more than 1/3 of the families of Puerto Rico really living in poverty levels as well. So any economic development aspiration has to consider a clear target on how we can actually remove or decrease the child poverty and the household poverty, and ideally how we can aspire to it through eradication of that as well. And as both Speaker Hernandez and Director Feliciano mentioned, it's about how we look for the equality elements and how we actually collectively work together to make it happen as well.
And what is Tote Maritime focused on as far as those initiatives?
Well, in our case, Puerto Rico depends 90% on imports to basically operate. And our industry, particularly tow that belongs to the domestic trade of cargo from the United States into Puerto Rico and vice versa, we carry, meaning the collective industry domestic, we carry more than 2/3 of the cargo that comes from the United States into Puerto Rico and so on. So for us has been fundamental in making the right investment on the technology and the eco-friendly elements that can actually take us to a much better standard than the rest of the shipping companies around the world. We are the first company running LNG chips, meaning we fuel our chips with LNG, which happens to be the most eco-friendly fuel in the market. We actually were the first one in the world introducing container chips, which is a remarkable accomplishment for such a small island to claim that we were the first, environmentally speaking, in introducing not only a clean fuel, but also a very steady cost-based fuel in that sense. We take care of a lot of the perishable supply chain. I mean, the importation of fresh produce from the United States to Puerto Rico is very, very critical. More than 30,000 containers a year. And without the velocity and the speed of this service that we currently provide in 2.5 transit time days, we wouldn't be able to claim FDA standards in the delivery of many of these fresh products for Puerto Rico. So we've been really upgrading our systems, our processes in order to continue delivering significant value to our customers and at the end to the end consumers in the island.
When I hear you talk about all of the volume, how much you do ship into the island, I wonder, after Hurricane Maria, but also after the other challenges that came in recent years, what did you learn about what you have to do or adjust or, just to continue business as you do in the island? And is that helping people on the island get what they need in a better or more timely way?
Every single event brought some interesting lessons. Starting with Hurricane Maria, it was amazing to see that cargo volumes increased by nearly 40% in the aftermath, with so much destruction not only on hard assets but even in consumables. We had to immediately procure additional ships in order to be able to service the market efficiently and as quickly as possible in that sense. So setting up resiliency plans to cope with that situation was a fundamental element in our business prior to the pandemic. And even after the pandemic, there were certainly a number of lessons that we need to take care in that sense. And when we look at the COVID-19 now, it's been amazing that for the first time in my lifetime, we've seen an influx of out-of-pocket money on the hands of Puerto Ricans in excess of $9 billion. That amount of money created an amazing demand, not only in essential goods, but not essential goods, to the point that we have been operating at 100% utilization throughout most of this year in that sense. And the good thing about it is operating in a business model that only touched a couple of ports, Jacksonville, Florida, and Puerto Rico. We had not suffered at all some of the issues that have been happening on the international trade, not only with the chips and availability of containers, but also the manufacturing of different non-essentials and essentials out of the international
the entire
trade.
Supply chain, you mean? Yeah.
It's been humongously disrupted to the point that you see more than 1,000% growth in rates to compensate some of those issues and limitations. We haven't seen none of that in the domestic trade. And as I did mention before, we do carry more than 2/3 of everything that comes in and out of this island. So for us to be able to operate business as normal throughout the pandemic has been a great accomplishment for sure.
But what Eduardo is explaining is the result of the change of life and culture in the island. This affects everybody in the island, the consumption of goods and services, the movement from retail for a lot of people who have gone now to services. They change completely the mentality. There's an increasement in self-employees. There's a lot of people in a small business. is people have to adjust to produce, to compete, to be efficient in this new market. There is a market that people are getting service and they want it fast, they want it with technology, and it's a completely change of how to do things if you want to compete in this market. Not just for the private sector, for the consumer sector, for the persons who don't want to even get out of their homes and they want to have their services and their goods be carried direct to their homes. So the changes of the offering, the financial aspect, the intervention of government in this process is very important in a way that we are not a stone in the way. So what we're doing over here in the house is to flexibilize permits, process to do business, to be a helper in the process of workers and business groups and enterprise in the island can be part of this economic growth. So the explanation of the details of percentage of what's going on in the market that Pagani explained is the reflect of the changes right now in the day-by-day life in every citizen over here in the island.
And on that front, when the amount of money that Eduardo, it's like, and also Speaker Hernandez touched upon it, it's like Puerto Rico, there's always a silver lining, and I like to see things more from the optimistic side. And I think we have gone through a lot and we have grown together to work for Puerto Rico, but also we're receiving an amount of federal funding that we've never seen before in the island. And because of the hurricanes and because of the COVID pandemic, and like Eduardo said, some of that money, a lot of it came straight to the hands of Puerto Ricans who, as you know, are American citizens. And we need to maximize that. And there is a goal of the government and Governor Pedro Pierluisi to maximize the use of those funds to identify real priorities. And something that I think we learned from the hurricane was also sort of to decentralize a little bit the operations on the metropolitan area in San Juan and on the port side of it, and make sure that we also have other regional strong infrastructure points like the Port of Ponce, the Mercedita Airport, the Aguadilla Airport. And we're working hard to have some of those funds from the American Rescue Plan going directly to these infrastructure resources that we have to strengthen them so that we decentralize that a little bit and we don't see the crisis that we saw during the hurricane. So that's important, and all this funding that we're receiving, that's the priority projects that we're looking at. And we have projects on the ports area right now that are priority projects, and we're developing, I think it's port number 15, El Muelle 15, developing a dry dock there to be able to repair the boats and everything that's carrying the cargo, and that's very important. And also strengthening the cruise industry that has been hit really hard by the pandemic and had a huge impact also in Puerto Rico's economy. So we are all working together towards that and making the best use of those millions and thousands of millions of dollars that Puerto Rico is receiving.
And to that point, I actually wanted to ask, we know that President Biden is promoting a Build Back Better plan, but also that a lot of the COVID stimulus relief money came to Puerto Rico as well. I was wondering if you guys could tell me, in terms of real numbers, how that affected the lives of people on the island, and also the sort of initiatives you're talking about that the federal funding can help improve and build on the island. How will that translate into real jobs and big numbers of jobs for people on the island?
You know, Linda, one of the beauties about managing cargo is that you get a very clear sense, empirically speaking, about what is coming in bigger quantities than before per commodity. And people that probably couldn't afford before buying an air conditioning unit or even a much bigger TV set. And that gave you a clear indication how much of that out-of-pocket money that came on the federal funding was immediately, used for that purpose. The real fact that we're now confronting is most of that money is gone. Probably some is being saved for some emergency by some people, but the reality is that that money is gone. Now comes another wave of funding for the recovery elements of Hurricane Maria, for the new recently approved project in the Senate for infrastructure, accounting for more than $1 trillion that could probably be converted into more than $5 billion for Puerto Rico in infrastructure improvement. There's a great opportunity to operate this island probably with one of the lowest ever unemployment rate. There's plenty of work out there right now. Every single business sector is actually desperate to get more employees to operate their businesses. And that is actually quite encouraging when you think about it. And once again, it's about how we holistically, meaning the private sector and the government, works together in making the best use of those funds. And we build a sustainable economy moving forward. And I want to stress again, we want to lead our child and our household to the lowest poverty level possible as well.
Yeah, and on that point, I wanted to mention something that's very important and happened in this administration, something that we've been working for years, was to extend the child tax credit to Puerto Rico to families that have less than 3 kids. For some reasons that we are not clear how that happened, Puerto Rico qualified for the child tax credit, but if you had 3 kids or more, not for your first or second child. And this Congress extended child tax credit to Puerto Rico and extended the higher amounts in the CARES Act of $3,000, I think, and $3,600 if they're 7 years, less than 17 years old. And that means a lot of money that's going to come to the pockets of needy families in Puerto Rico. And that's a measure that's very important to deal with the child poverty that Eduardo brought up, which is very important for us to work and to try to eradicate. The other program that was extended to Puerto Rico that we've also been working for a long time on this is the earned income tax credit. The only difference with the child tax credit right now in Puerto Rico is that in the United States, families are already seeing some of that money because they're receiving a monthly payment on it. In the case of Puerto Rico, since there wasn't not a database, the IRS didn't have a database on which are the families that have 1 or 2 kids because they have never received the credit. It was really complicated this first round to be able to make these monthly payments. However, once January starts out and IRS opens the paper, make available all the documents to file the federal tax return, Puerto Rican families with kids are going to be able to request this credit. And that's very important that we educate, and we're going to do campaigns to educate the people and the families in Puerto Rico so they can request the credit. And once they do that, then they're going to be able to get this a monthly payment once we create this database. But that is a very, very important initiative of this administration, and making that, extending that, and making it permanent to Puerto Rico.
Speaker Hernandez, I want to ask you the same question. Yeah.
One of the biggest priorities for us is to stop the migration from people from Puerto Rico to the States. And we can have all these programs that we are always got together to ask for them to be equality and parity in the island, but we need to have the edge to really compete. And right now, for example, we have this infrastructure bill that's going to be financed the double the foreign tax to all the jurisdictions outside the United States. Puerto Rico is part of the United States, but it's treated internationally in the tax code, international tax code. It's not included in the domestic tax code. So we are asking right now for a credit to activities, job creation, the economic development for those foreign entities in the island. That is very important to be part of that bill, the bill of infrastructure, to be part of the process that we won't lose the capacity of job creation, especially to this aspiration of the administration to reshoring those manufactured from Ireland, Singapore, and China. So the only way to compete is to have edge, to have a rentability or opportunity to those manufacturers to be in the island. So that is a priority for us. So the only way we keep people in the island if they have a job. job creation has to be our priority, and have to be two ways. One way is to have opportunities with big manufacturers and sophisticated jobs, and the other way is to motivate participation as a small business and a great opportunity of these huge quantities of federal funds that we have in the island. The other thing is we need to have discipline in the private and the public sectors in the way that keep expenditure low, because this is artificial resources that's going to be here for long. So sooner or later, these resources at the end of the infrastructure, I really like what Carmen Feliciani explained, that if you want to prioritize where you invest resources, on the way, if you invest in the dry dock that we have to repair, then you will have opportunity to repair those boats in the future. Then you really invest where you really need to invest, not in something that you're going to lose and do not have economic growth and opportunity. Every cent has to be well planned, put in some place that in the end is going to be rentability to our offering. So that's a small example of the dry dock. Is something that we have to be done. We are an island. How come we have to have our boats, our ferries, our all our maritime infrastructure have to be repaired in Tampa and San Croix? It's like, why we don't have that? So that is real good for this administration. We invest in this kind of prioritize something that you build or you rebuild or you fix for the future when we will not have those funds artificially flowing to the island.
I fully concur with both comments from Director Feliciano and Speaker Hernandez. Managing equality is a fundamental element for our growth and our business, but generating worth in our fellow Puerto Ricans is fundamental as well, and that can only be done by certainly creating jobs and making sure that we create a very stable base for that. And Puerto Rico has a very unique opportunity on the fact that, we lost nearly 1 million people in the last decade. And we are graduating amazing professionals from the University of Puerto Rico as well as other private institutions. And the only way we can actually bring some of these resources that have been leaving the island is by creating good, remunerated, and stable jobs so they can aspire to come back and help us take our economy to the next level as well. It is fundamental that we have a true value offering for these professionals. And I'm glad to say that some of that is happening already. Some of the growth that is going on in few sectors is already incentivizing and influencing some of these professionals to come back to the island. You cannot build an economy on a declining population. And this is a real challenge for Puerto Rico. For the last 5 years, our birth rate has been lower than our death rate. And that is a big challenge, and we need to find a means for attracting people to come back to the island and help us be part of the economic development process in that sense.
I think that's important what you're talking about, educational opportunity and workforce opportunity for people to feel that they do have that future on the island. I have enjoyed this discussion so much so far, but we had asked for questions for people to submit to see if we could get to some other topics having to do with Puerto Rico's path forward as well. So I just wanted to get to one or two of those. And we have a question that asks of everyone, what steps do you think should be implemented to protect the island from future storms and the growing threat of climate change?
For us, the first thing is we used to really go to analyze the construction codes. For example, flooding areas, relocation, and invest in the right places. On the other part, we need to have some mitigation for the coastal areas because we are losing coast like everybody else around the globe. So we have to invest to mitigate that global reality. So we need to defend our coast relocate people in the safe areas, and revisit our construction code in the way that incentivize the building. And we have billions of dollars to rebuild the island. So those properties, those new homes, absolutely at least have solar panels. Do not rely the whole 100% on power in the power authority, a water supply in a way that if this happen again, this is part of our life. We're gonna still receive hurricanes through the years. So we have to be more ready. Our people is very resilient, but our infrastructure not. So we have to adjust our mentality, our way of life to translate to the infrastructure.
How much is the government in Puerto Rico focused on climate change and how you can combat it?
Well, the governor, the climate change and dealing with the changes that Puerto Rico is already seeing. We know that climate change is a reality because we're living through them. And we're seeing like our coast getting shorter, and it's a priority for the government. He has a task force just dealing with the climate change issue and generating also activity to do research on the island and looking also at the blue economy and how to also save our marine resources away from the impact of climate change. We're very aware of what's happening, and we are working with private enterprises as well to make sure that we do everything we can do to mitigate the effects of climate change in Puerto Rico. As far as trying to avoid, prevent hurricane, the way the question was framed, we as Puerto Rican know there's nothing that we can do about it. We're going to have more hurricanes, sadly, because of climate change. They are going to be stronger than in the past, but we're building on resiliency. I think we learned a huge lesson with Hurricane Maria. And one of the things we've done is change our laws on energy related and trying to move toward renewables. We have certain deadlines imposed by the law that Puerto Rico needs to move. I think it's by 2025, 40% needs to be renewable. And Mr. Hernandez can correct me if I'm wrong. So we're working hard on that, making sure that our energy system will be able to sustain a hurricane to the magnitude that was Hurricane Maria. And also to be prepared. I think we learned our lesson. We took note. And I'm sure that we will be more prepared. Hopefully there won't be a next time, but we know that living where we are, we need to be ready and prepared. And that's what we've been doing, and this administration has been working toward that.
Eduardo, how do you have to adjust to these climate realities?
Well, the private sector and the industry I actually belong, we had interesting and very well documented resiliency plan or business continuity plans, and we learned right after every single event, meaning Hurricane Irma, Maria, the earthquake, and the pandemic, that this is an ongoing process, that we have to continually not only do an assessment about what we learned from every event, but we have to become better at doing simulations or even things that we can not even imagine immediately about it. One thing I'm very delighted to say is that I have been participating for the last 4 years in the Puerto Rico Business Emergency Operating Center, which is the private body that works with the federal government as well as the Puerto Rico Emergency Agency. And I've seen year after year a greater collaboration and holistic approach on how to deal a future crisis in that sense. I'm even proud to say that Puerto Rico has already established a bit of a case study for many jurisdictions in the world about how to start, managing crisis and becoming more resilient. And part of it is because we had really suffered a lot in a very short period, and the lessons in that period, and the work together between the local, the federal, and the private sector had really enabled us to become better and better in managing together, future crises. And this is an area in which I feel really, really proud of how the three components has been truly working out. A good example to follow in many other things as well.
That's excellent. Okay, we have another question for you, for everyone, which is, how can individuals help the many efforts that are going on in Puerto Rico? If individual people are interested in helping in some way.
Well, first of all, I think it's important that we all speak with one voice and one message. I think this is something that, as the head of the Puerto Rico Federal Affairs Administration, has been one of my goals. There's a lot of Puerto Ricans out of Puerto Rico. We are 5 million and growing in the States, more than the 3.1 million in the island. Everyone is very eager to help. And I think one thing that has worked to the detriment of Puerto Rico is that we might go to Congress and trying to speak, and we don't speak with one voice and get some confusion. So I think I'm available to meet with anyone. I've been doing it since I started in this position, to align our messaging so that we can go to Congress and ask for what we deserve. We are American citizens, educate people. Sadly, we still need to educate people. One silver lining of Hurricane Maria was that finally Puerto Rico was put on the spot, and people understood that we're part of the United States and that this is not Costa Rica, that is Puerto Rico. But we need to coordinate. I know that there's a lot of people in what we call the diaspora, Puerto Ricans living in the mainland, that are advocating on behalf of the SNAP to NAP, like nutrition programs, SSI for Puerto Rico, Medicaid, equal treatment for Medicaid. And that's a way to help. You have voting representation in the States. Sadly, we don't have that in Puerto Rico. So your voice counts, and you need to reach out to your members of Congress, reach out to your senators. We do not have representation in Congress, and we need you to use your members to create a conscience that Puerto Rico needs you. And that, I think it's very important. And from my standpoint of what I do in Congress, that for me is the most that you can do. Make sure that you use your political power to impact all the public policy regarding Puerto Rico that comes from Congress and the administration.
That's excellent. Mr. Hernandez.
For me, it's echo. What we need is to have continuity of the message. There's a lot of distortion sometimes. People asking for the same thing, but they don't use the same ask, and they change. And it's just continuing in the way that Carmen Feliciano was explaining. It's a lot of time we are asking for the same proposal, but there isn't the same pitch. So what we need to align our message, and we have a lot of people in the Hispanic community that can knock on doors and help us have some echo and talk to their elected officials and in the federal level and support our causes over here in the island. We really need equality and an even opportunity like every other citizen in the United States. That's the only thing that we ask. Simple to move those discrimination just based that citizens that have a right in New York or in California move to Puerto Rico and lose those benefits or lose those rights. So and even the way to do business, it's not the same for a company is located in Tampa that comes to Puerto Rico. It's completely changed. So what we need is equality, the same treatment to the people of Puerto Rico, and simple. Everybody can help us. Everybody that I have an ask of all those people that are listening to us to have some echoes to our ask, to our efforts to grow and develop our island.
I fully concur with both Director Feliciano and Speaker Hernandez, and I would just summarize what they said with a very good example, in my opinion, from the private sector view. The coalition managing the transition from the NAP to SNAP is probably one of the best case studies in this matter. It is one of the few things that we have gone collectively and unified, holding hand together, meaning the private sector, meaning the government, in pursuing that equality element over there, is how we can actually replicate that more and make sure that we go as much as possible unified on working different initiatives, not only the ones about equality, but the ones about developing the island and the self-sustainability of the island. in that sense. So I have to say that once again, I'm really delighted in that particular case how the NAP SNAP initiative is being worked.
That's all excellent information to have people on the mainland advocate or to speak to their own leaders about these issues that they find important if they know that the people on the island don't have the voice that they have. Is there any way that individuals can help?
That's the way they have their right, they have their voice. Just raise it for us.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for this discussion. You have all left me much more hopeful, for sure, than I answered the discussion about the island and what could be possible for the path forward. So to Rafael Tatito Hernandez, Eduardo Pagan of Tote Maritime, Carmen Feliciano, Director Feliciano, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. That was so informative, and we appreciate it.
Thank
you very much.
And everyone else, please don't forget to keep tweeting about the conference. You want to use the hashtag CHCI with Hispanic Heritage Month. So hashtag CHCIHHM21. And don't forget to join us at 5 p.m. for Disney's Encanto. It's a behind the scenes preview. And of course, we also have a full slate of sessions scheduled for the conference. So if you know people who would be interested in the conference or who would benefit from it, please encourage them to sign up and to log in. You can register at chci.org. And don't forget to join our virtual gala, our 44th annual awards gala that is happening Thursday, September 23rd. If you are registered for the conference, you can already go to the gala, so don't forget to do that at chci.org. And thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Linda Lopez.